representative of government of Ukraine and the United States of America, and all guests here. It's a pleasure to do a brief presentation on the numbers that we are observing and the context of where we are operating. So let me start first with setting the scene of why the world needs the grain coming from Ukrainian farmers and also from Russian farmers for the agri-food system commodities. As we know and we have been reporting all the time, Ukraine and Russia Federation together were key exporters of cereals, 1/3 of the world's cereals. So they were playing a crucial role. In 2021, either the Russian Federation or Ukraine, or both, rank among the top 3 global exporters of wheat, barley, maize, rapeseed oil, sunflower seed, and sunflower oil. The Russian Federation also ranked as the world top exporter of nitrogen fertilizer, the second leading supplier of potassic fertilizer, and the third largest exporter of phosphorus fertilizers. We know that maritime transportation is the most efficient and the cost-efficient way to shipping agricultural products, and that's why this initiative is so important. And the maritime transportation came to a complete halt in 24th of February 2022 with the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. And that's where we are seeing the challenges that we have to resolve, and that's why this initiative was so important. The figures that you see in the bottom are basically how the export share has evolved between the beginning 2021 and 2022, and you will see substantial impacts on the supplier for the different commodities of the countries. Now, there were two prior to the onset of the war, maritime shipments through the Black Sea accounted to over 90% of the Ukraine's agricultural commodity exports. Market and also farmers in Ukraine reacted with great relief when on July 2022, the so-called Istanbul agreements were agreed. And there are two distinct sets of agreements were signed in Istanbul. The first thing is the agreement on the safe transportation of grain and foodstuff from Ukraine ports, so the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And the parties to this initiative are the Republic of Turkey, the Russian Federation, and Ukraine, as proposed by the Secretary General of the United Nations. And in the initiative, the partners recognize the role of the UN Secretary General in securing the discussions and request his assistance in its implementation. The second was the Memorandum of Understanding between Russian Federation and the Secretary of the United Nations on promoting Russian food products and fertilizers to the world markets. It's important to note that the Black Sea Grain Initiative was negotiated under auspices of the UN Secretary General within existing maritime laws. In particular, paragraph 2 of the BSGI states the initiative is based on agreements of partners of the International Convention of the Safety of Life at Sea in 1974, as amended, and Regulations 11-2-11 and the International Ship and Port Facility Security Code, Part B, paragraph 426. FAO, of course, doesn't have any legal authority over any of these agreements. However, we closely track the information and what is happening in this initiative. Now, why the initiative was so important? The main purpose of the initiative was basically to move grain into the markets, because since the war, and as these were key exporting countries, the prices started to go up, and that, of course, has their link into food security. But also, of course, it wanted to increase availability and increase the way in which farmers of Ukraine were able to move their grain and get the revenues that they were supposed to get because of this. Considering the significance of the two countries as key providers of food and fertilizers globally, the main purpose of the Istanbul Agreement was the resumption of Ukrainian grain exports via the Black Sea ports, and to ensure that Russian food products and fertilizers reach global markets and are not impeded by measures of imposed upon the country. The objective was to improve global food availability and lessening the pressure on the world prices, thus facilitating access to food. For the implementation of the agreement, a joint coordination center, the GCC, was set up in Istanbul on 27 of July of 2022 under the auspices of the United Nations, comprised of a senior representatives of Turkey, the Russian Federation, Ukraine, and the United Nations. Now, the results were extremely important, and this just summarizes all the work that the Joint Center has been doing to be able to collect this information. We have been informally helping them, but they have now a completely online system in which you can track everything that is happening every day. So up to today, up to the last data that we have, 32.4 million metric tons were moved through the Black Sea Grain Initiative. 655,000 tons were exported by WFP, and here you see in this graph the composition. Now, a little over half of the total commodities exported was maize, and little over a quarter was wheat. A frequently voiced criticism is that the exports are not benefiting the most vulnerable countries. And the data show that 57% of exports went to developing countries with different income levels. Furthermore, it is evident that the Black Sea Grain Initiative have contributed to improving global food availability and lowering global food prices. It needs to be noted, nevertheless, that no information is available on the final use and the final destination of the shipments, because, for example, there are many cases that cereals that were sent to one country through the Black Sea Grain Initiative were re-exported or processed and then exported to another country, and we cannot trace that. So we need to be very careful when we look at these numbers. So the minimum is what we can record, but there is a lot more that goes processed after it moved through Turkey or other countries. Now, just to give you a graphical impact of what happened since the establishment of the Grain Sea Initiative. And you can see clearly that prices start to fall significantly as a result of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Right now, we are reporting around 40 months of the falling of the FAO Food Price Index. So this graph clearly shows that the Black Sea Grain Initiative had a significant impact, and that's why it's so important is renewal. Even more, if we go into the detail up to today of how prices are evolving, as I mentioned before, the stabilization of the spiraling prices was one of the main objectives of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And in fact, international export quotations of basic foodstuff as measured by the FAO Food Price Index saw near uninterrupted increases between the second half of 2020 and March 2022. And 2020 was mostly because of the COVID-19 recovery, and when the index reached all-time high in February 2022. Now, since reaching its all-time high in March 2022, the FAO Food Price Index has declined, and in May 2023 it averaged 22.1% lower than the peak reached in March 2022. And today we launched the FAO Food Price Index of June, and again we observe a decline on the food price index. The graph on the right-hand side shows the price indices of the various commodities, similar to what I showed before. However, those meat and sugar have increased in January 2023 for other reasons which are not related directly to this. It needs to be noted that FAO vegetable oil price index also declined and almost uninterruptedly since then. So we have seen a significant improvement over the evolution of price, and overall it can be said that the Black Sea Grain Initiative has contributed to lessening the pressures on world prices by increasing global availability and exportable supplies. The Black Sea Grain Initiative also enabled the resumption of exports of grains and other foodstuff as well as fertilizers, including ammonia, through a safe maritime humanitarian corridor from the three key Ukrainian ports, Odessa, Chermorsk, and Yusil. As it can be seen in this slide, the peak of exports under the initiative took place in October 2022, and also in March 2023, when exports were in the range of 4 million tons each month. However, exports have declined to 1.33 million tons in May 2023 before expanding again in June. In fact, in mid-June, the offices of the UN coordinator of the Black Sea Grain Initiative issued an update warning that the volume of food exported by the initiative in May was the lowest since the start of the initiative and well below shipping demands and Ukraine export capacity. The decline was mainly due to the dramatic reduction in the number of inspections. Since 25 of May, the Joint Coordination Group has reduced the number of inspection teams from 3 to 2. It is with concern that we watch the declining volumes passing from the inspection of Istanbul, which has resulted in a reduction in the movement of vessels coming in and out of Ukrainian seaports, leading to drop in the food exports, which are essential to global markets. Now, our preliminary analysis of available trade data, and here I need to stress available because we are not getting any more reporting of some key exporting countries, indicate that although some countries such as Egypt decrease their import volumes, countries often manage to diversify their sources of origin of food. However, this came at a cost. FAO estimates that the global food import bill reached $1.95 trillion in 2022, up 11% from 2021, because mostly of the increasing prices, and forecasts that the bill will increase by a further 1.5% in 2023 to reach $1.98 trillion. It is important to note that most of the increase is generally due to higher prices. As a result of the increased import costs for food, many countries already battling macroeconomic problems, depends their balance on payments problems and exchange rate problems are facing significant challenges. These two charts that we are presenting here compare major suppliers of wheat and maize exports on a monthly basis from January 21 to March 2023. To account for seasonality, the dotted line represents the reference level of cumulative exports in the same month in the previous year. While there are constraints with regard to the availability of data, we can see that the Black Sea Grain Initiative play a significant role in allowing exports of wheat and maize from Ukraine to reach global markets. As mentioned before, this has improved global food availabilities and contributed to lower international prices. This also explains why we highlight the importance of extending the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and especially because it reduces uncertainty and allows predictability, and especially because the renewal is just at the beginning of the harvest, which is a big challenge. So we need to work hard in trying to do this. Now, if we look at the world fertilizer markets, and we basically look at urea and DAP, we have seen a significant decrease in the markets. And that's not magic, that's because there is more supplies. So fertilizers are moving and nitrogen is moving, which allows this to happen. So it's very important to understand that there is a flow of fertilizers in the world, which is happening enormously. Another challenge, especially of the second part of the agreement, was the mobility of gas and the ammonia gas. And what I show here in this graph is that the evolution of ammonia, especially in 2022, has started to be recovered. If you see at the level of exports, especially from Russian Federation, which is the light green, is the 6 in the bar from top to bottom, you will see that there has been a significant shrink because of the close of the transfer through the duct of the gas pipeline. But clearly, there has been a supply response, and in the table, you will see which countries have been the one that has increased the level of exports to be able to compensate this decrease, especially around Gulf countries, which has substantially increased the level of exports that they are doing in gas, in ammonia. In this graph, we are showing the monthly imports of ammonia and the breakdown by exporting country. And you can see that since the war in Ukraine, there has been a reduction, but then this has started to stabilize over time, which means that today we have enough ammonia in the market, and that's why the prices are falling down. But what is important also to note is that this, of course, affects certain countries and was affecting certain countries. Especially, there were countries that were affected in northern part of Africa because of the production of fertilizers. But this has now stabilized, and there are other partners which have allowed these imports to flow, which has stabilized the price of ammonia, and therefore the production of fertilizers, and that's why we are observing better prices of fertilizers in the world today. So let me just conclude with very few remarks. First, Ukraine and Russian Federation are a main supplier of food and agricultural commodities in the global markets. The achievements from the Black Sea Grain Initiative improve food availability on the global markets, contributing to lower, less volatile international food import commodities. Market transparency and the provision of accurate and up-to-date data and information will be essential. To continue producing, Ukrainian farmers need markets to sell. So far, they have been bearing the brunt of transportation costs and low farm gate prices. If as a consequence of the lack of market access and other problems, such as the possible long-term impacts of the Kharkova Dam destruction on the irrigation in the region, which will mainly affect the internal food security, because these irrigated areas cover high-value commodities which are internally consumed and therefore will affect internal food security and also the neighborhood countries. Farmers retire from farming, the problem could be availability globally and might be bigger, and markets will need time to adjust. Of course, there have been a supply response, and that's why we are observing lower prices also, but still they play a significant role in the market, and that's why continuing the agreement of the Black Sea Grain Initiative for both countries is essential. The Black Sea Grain Initiative has had a positive impact on global food availability and market stabilization, and its continuation and well-functioning will be essential for global food security in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the FAO Chief Economist. I now give the floor to the WFP Chief Economist and Director of Research, Assessment and Monitoring, Arif Husain.
Let me just talk about a few things which we are seeing from what's happening in the countries, basically. As you well know, needs are high. Funding is getting cut. And this is a situation where literally every cent matters. Now, why is that important for the Black Sea Initiative? First and foremost, like Máximo said, it brought international prices down. As of yesterday, 33 million tons were shipped out since the start of this initiative. 725,000 metric tons of those came to WFP. And they went to countries like Yemen, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, Somalia. But this is not the big story. The big story is that we all go to the international markets to buy a lot more than 725,000 metric tons. Last year we did 4.2 million metric tons. A lot of that was in kind, but also a lot of that was on the commercial market. Poor countries also go to the international markets to buy their food themselves. So it is not a question of where the Black Sea food actually goes. It is a question of it brings international prices down, so whether you're a rich country or a poor country, you can benefit from that. I think this is one point we must understand. It is not about here or there. It is about bringing prices down for everybody. The second thing is, the question is, okay, let's say for 1 second that Black Sea Initiative stops. What will happen then? Does that mean that we won't have food in the markets, in the international markets? No, we will have. Others will compensate, but it will be compensated at a cost. And that cost is both in time and in logistics. Meaning now instead of going to Ukraine or Black Sea, maybe you go to Canada or you go to Australia or you go to Argentina, which means you're going to pay more in terms of money, transport, but you're also going to pay more in terms of time. Now, at a time when our prices, as we sit right now, are 33% higher than pre-COVID, do we want to see this increase? At a time when food inflation is a concern for everybody around the world right now. When we look at, we follow about 170 countries. I can tell you that in 47 of those 170 countries, food inflation year on year more than 15%. 15 countries more than 50%. 4 countries more than 100%. The second thing, if you're importing food, Máximo mentioned that, balance of payment issues. Prices are going up. Your ability to purchase on the international market has gone down, consequence of COVID and then war in Ukraine. And then interest rates are rising, and then there is high debt burden. So what happens? It all translates into balance of payment shortfalls. Meaning countries want to import food, but they just don't have enough money. So do we want to contribute more to that by stopping this so there is more volatility in the market? Let me just say something a little bit on the volatility. One thing is extension. One thing is piecemeal extension, 60 days. And if you want to really see how the markets are reacting to every 60 days, just look at how the futures move for these commodities, whether it's wheat, whether it's corn. Just look at the price of wheat on the 17th of May, because this last extension was on the 18th, there was a 10% hike. And then it came down. That type of volatility hurts poor people, poor countries who are already spending as much as they are spending. So bottom line, it's not whether 2.5% or 3% went to poor countries or went to Africa. The bottom line is prices came down for everybody. And that's what we should be asking for, that's what we should be pushing for, and that's what we are trying to do. So just to end, we appeal that we need to minimize the volatility. We need to extend the Black Sea Initiative. We need to minimize the volatility, meaning extend it for a longer period till hopefully the end of this war, so that prices continue their downward trajectory and food starts to become affordable. And my very last thing is, prices are down, but please don't make the mistake of thinking that they are affordable. Because today, prices are at a level just before the war in Ukraine started, which for food was a 10-year high, and for fuel it was a 7-year high. So if there was no war in Ukraine, today we will be talking about high record level of prices, which have continued after COVID. I'll stop right
there. Thank you to the WFP Director, Dina Saleh.
Thank you, Rodney, and good morning, or good afternoon, actually, everyone. So to the representatives of Ukraine and US Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today in this important event as we focus on the critical role of Ukraine in feeding the world. As we gather here, it's crucial to address the impact and significance of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, as has already been said by the previous speakers, for global food security. And today we have the opportunity to shed light on the positive contributions of this initiative, especially for the vulnerable populations, both in and out of Ukraine, and highlighting the potential of this initiative. I will skew slightly the discussion from the initiative, a little bit more focusing on where IFAD really, puts a lot of its attention on, and that is on the smallholders and the rural communities. As a specialized UN agency and as an international financial institution, IFAD assumes a vital role in supporting resilience and capacity building, effectively mitigating the detrimental effects of shocks, while safeguarding the long-term achievements of development. We at IFAD serve as the primary proponents for smallholder farmers and rural communities within the United Nations, but also more broadly within the development community, as we look at diligently equipping these smallholders and rural communities with the necessary resources, knowledge, and opportunities to foster resilience, expand their enterprises, and empower them to prosper. By investing in agriculture, rural infrastructure, and sustainable farming practices, we empower rural people, enabling them to enhance their food security and to uplift the nutritional well-being of their families. We've all seen the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, which inflicted a severe toll on the food systems, compounded by the enduring challenges of climate change and extreme weather events. We know that supply chains were disrupted then, and market access was also curtailed, and economic uncertainties also unfolded. These multifaceted trials have led to disruptions in the availability of food, but mainly cereals, and a precipitous surge in food prices, as you already heard. In 2021, the prices of wheat and other coarse grains have skyrocketed by approximately 30%, intensifying the plight of vulnerable populations already grappling with their own adversities. Moreover, all these shocks shed light on the risks associated with heavy reliance of mostly least developing countries, but also middle-income countries, on imported cereals, as disruptions in global supply chains and trade restrictions have impeded access to affordable and readily available imported cereals. So the focus here is on the dependence on imports, which affects significantly those smallholder farmers and rural communities. Furthermore, the supply chain disruptions and market closures, as we see, have rendered it arduous for them to sell their produce, resulting in diminished incomes and precarious financial stability. Smallholder farmers have faced additional challenges, including the significant price inflation of basic food items, as we heard, and this further exacerbates the difficulties faced by smallholder farmers and highlights the urgent need for support and interventions to ensure their resilience and foster their economic growth. So the war has further compounded these trials by smallholder farmers and disrupted further their access to food, their access to cereals, their access to markets, as well as their access to essential inputs such as fertilizer. And consequently, their livelihoods hang precariously in the balance, while the well-being of other impoverished rural and urban populations reliant on these farmers for sustenance remains under grave threat. The surge in basic food prices, particularly for cereals, adds an additional burden to smallholder farmers, who find themselves not only as producers, but also as consumers of food. Amidst these adversities, food insecurity levels vary across the rural-urban continuum. Initiatives like the Black Sea Grain Initiative emerge as beacons of hope. As we've heard, The initiative has facilitated over 33 million metric tons of foodstuffs to 45 countries worldwide. It's through these endeavors, like those developing nations, has received a significant share of food export, with wheat exports alone accounting for 65% of total wheat cargo, and benefiting nations in dire need. What I'd like to point out here is that countries that are in IFAD's portfolio, such as Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, and Djibouti, have greatly benefited from increased grain exports. And consequently, as we've heard from Máximo and also heard from Arif, that the wheat price inflation is projected to be moderately moving from 14.2 in 2022 to about 8.6% in 2024. Yet, a substantial export gap of approximately 1,633,000 tons persists in these developing countries. The pressures faced by smallholder farmers compel them to prioritize short-term gains at the expense of the long-term health of their soil. So what we're witnessing as well is exacerbation in the detrimental cycle of land degradation. Heightened prices also spike disproportionately, impacting these poorer households as a greater portion of their budgets are allocated to food expenses. This reinforces the critical importance of initiatives like the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which work to minimize volatility, ensure affordability, and enable smallholders to continue their operations, fostering long-term stability and resilience. In the longer term, it is crucial to address the issue of food dependency in the context of the Food System Initiative. Many countries, including these smallholder farmers, heavily rely on imports. And to promote national food systems grounded in local production and reducing dependence on imports, concerted efforts will be necessary. This entails supporting those small-scale farmers and their communities, placing them at the heart of the food systems transformation, as emphasized in the UN Food Systems Summit. In response to the urgent needs caused by the war and the compounding crisis, IFAD has launched a new initiative called the Crisis Response Initiative, and this initiative is geared towards safeguarding livelihoods as well as building their resilience in rural communities, capitalizing on emerging market opportunities for small-scale producers. So I'd like to just end by saying, in conclusion, the challenges we face in global food systems, compounded by the conflict, demand swift action and unwavering collaboration. What we see at IFAD is that there is an unwavering commitment to protect rural livelihoods, mitigating the worst impacts of the food crisis on vulnerable communities, to foster their long-term resilience. However, we cannot confront these challenges alone. Partnerships and synergy play a strong and vital role in achieving these goals. Collaboration amongst nations, organizations, stakeholders is essential to leverage collective expertise, resources, and innovation. And by working together, we can maximize the impact of initiatives like the Black Sea Grain Initiative, creating a comprehensive and sustainable approach to global food security. And it's no surprise that, as Mr. Gorbachev was saying, that Ukraine is looking for alternative routes, but these are still fall short of the supply capacity and demand for these critical commodities. So I'd like really to just end by saying, let's seize this opportunity to work together as an international community towards global food security and make a lasting difference in the lives of the most vulnerable populations.